It was just another ordinary day at the local grocery store. But for Rachel Blake, a 70-year-old self-made millionaire, it felt anything but. Dressed in a sophisticated but understated outfit, she glided down the aisles, her mind busy with thoughts of upcoming business meetings and a thriving empire. As she rounded the corner, her eyes met his. He was a young cashier, maybe in his late 20s, with striking blue eyes and messy brown hair. His name tag read Ethan. He looked tired but had a warm, welcoming smile that instantly drew her in. Rachel's heart skipped a beat, though she dismissed the feeling as mere curiosity. She was here to buy groceries, not chase after infatuations. Ethan scanned her items quickly, his hands deft and efficient, but there was a calmness to the way he interacted with her. She could sense that he was different from the others who typically worked in the store. He had a certain charm, a quiet confidence that made her feel seen. "Would you like help out with your bags, ma'am?" Ethan asked as he bagged her groceries. Rachel hesitated for a moment, considering the offer. "That would be kind," she said with a smile, catching a glimpse of his sincere eyes. Rachel didn't think much of it at first, but over the next few days, she found herself returning to that same grocery store more often. She didn't need anything, really, but each time she visited, Ethan was there. And each time, their conversations became a little longer, a little more personal. One day, as he scanned her groceries, he noticed a picture frame tucked into her basket. It was a family photo, her smiling in the center, surrounded by people. Her children, grandchildren, friends. Ethan noticed the sadness in her eyes as she looked at the frame. "Is everything okay?" he asked gently, his voice quiet, but filled with sincerity. Rachel hesitated before speaking. "I lost my husband last year," she said softly, her voice trailing off. She hadn't shared this with anyone outside of her family, but something about Ethan's presence made her feel safe. "I'm sorry," Ethan replied, his voice thick with empathy. "That must be really hard." Rachel nodded. They locked eyes for a moment, and in that moment, something unspoken passed between them. It wasn't romantic, not yet. But there was a connection, a recognition of two souls that, despite the age difference and vastly different lives, understood one another. A few weeks passed, and Rachel found herself looking forward to her trips to the grocery store. Not for the items she was purchasing, but for the chance to see Ethan. She had begun to notice little details about him. The way he tucked his hair behind his ear when he was focused, the faint scent of pine that lingered around him, and how he always made sure to ask about her day, genuinely interested. It was a Saturday evening when she finally decided to do something bold. She had just finished shopping when she turned to him and said, "Ethan, would you like to join me for dinner sometime? I know a wonderful little restaurant. My treat, of course." Ethan blinked in surprise, clearly not expecting the invitation. He cleared his throat, caught off guard by the proposition, but after a brief pause, he smiled. "I'd like that," he said, his voice tinged with uncertainty. The idea of two people from such different worlds sharing a meal together felt both exciting and a little intimidating. But Rachel had learned not to let fear hold her back. Life had a way of surprising her when she least expected it. The night of their dinner, Rachel couldn't remember the last time she had been this nervous. She arrived at the restaurant a little early, dressed in a sleek black dress that accentuated her age-defying beauty. When Ethan walked in, dressed casually but with a hint of nervousness in his posture, Rachel couldn't help but smile. He looked handsome in his simplicity, his demeanor polite, yet filled with a hint of charm. As they sat down and began to talk, the conversation flowed easily. They shared stories of their lives. Rachel spoke of her business endeavors, the highs and lows of her career, while Ethan talked about his humble beginnings and dreams of becoming more than just a cashier. Rachel was captivated by his passion, his ambition. There was something infectious about the way he spoke, like he believed anything was possible. Ethan found himself mesmerized by her intellect and grace. Rachel had an air of sophistication that came from experience, but she also had an authenticity that made him feel comfortable. Despite their age gap, they had so much in common. Their love for life, for laughter, and the subtle understanding that no matter how much time passed, they were both still searching for meaning and connection. The night ended with a gentle walk along the moonlit streets near the restaurant. The air was cool, and Rachel's heels clicked softly against the pavement. Ethan walked beside her, close, but not too close, as if unsure of the boundaries between them. When they reached the park near Rachel's car, she turned to him. "Thank you for a lovely evening," she said, her eyes softening as she looked at him. The street lights above cast a gentle glow on his face, accentuating the warmth in his blue eyes. Ethan stood still for a moment, his heart racing. He had never felt this drawn to someone, especially not someone so much older. But everything about Rachel was magnetic. Her beauty, her intelligence, and the kindness in her heart. "I'm glad you asked me," Ethan said, his voice low and sincere. Before Rachel could respond, he took a step forward, his hand gently cupping her cheek. There was no hesitation in his movement, only the pure certainty that this was the right moment. Their lips met in a soft, tentative kiss. The world around them seemed to pause as the connection deepened. Rachel felt alive, like something had awakened in her heart, something she hadn't realized was dormant for so long. Ethan felt the same. This wasn't just a kiss. It was the beginning of something neither of them had expected. As Rachel and Ethan's connection grew stronger, word began to spread around town. People who had seen them together started whispering. Rachel, the wealthy, elegant businesswoman, and Ethan, the young, humble cashier. Everyone had an opinion. Some of Rachel's friends were concerned, though none dared to say anything directly. "It's just unusual," one of them remarked to another over lunch. "She's old enough to be his mother. What could they possibly have in common?" Meanwhile, Ethan's co-workers raised their own eyebrows. "What does she see in him?" one of them asked. "She could have anyone." But neither Rachel nor Ethan paid much attention to the rumors. The connection they shared felt so real that no amount of gossip could shake them. In fact, they were starting to embrace it. Ethan, despite being young, knew that love was unpredictable, and age had no real bearing on the way the heart felt. Rachel had already lived a full life, and this new chapter felt like an unexpected gift. They continued to meet in private, sharing intimate moments and discovering more about one another with each passing day. One weekend, Rachel invited Ethan to her home. It wasn't an extravagant gesture. It was simply an opportunity to spend time in each other's company, outside of the grocery store or the restaurant. She had a sprawling estate, a beautiful house nestled on acres of land. Ethan, though initially intimidated, was quickly taken by the warmth of Rachel's home. The decor was tasteful yet inviting, filled with personal touches that spoke of her love for life, family, and beauty. Rachel led him to her library, a quiet room filled with books, a perfect spot for two people who enjoyed thoughtful conversations. They spent the day reading together, occasionally exchanging thoughts on what they were reading. As the sun began to set, the two of them sat by the fireplace, sharing a glass of wine. Rachel couldn't remember the last time she had felt so at ease with someone. Ethan, in turn, marveled at how comfortable he felt in her presence. There was no pretense between them, no judgment, just two people sharing an evening filled with simple pleasures. That night, they fell asleep in the same bed, though there was no pressure. just the contentment of two souls enjoying the company of one another. Months passed, and Rachel and Ethan's relationship continued to blossom. Ethan had left his job at the grocery store, finding work with one of Rachel's business ventures, something he had always dreamed of. They made each other better, pushed each other to pursue their passions, and reveled in the love they shared. One evening, while on a trip to a quiet beach town, Ethan surprised Rachel with a romantic proposal. He had been planning it for months, carefully selecting the perfect moment. As the sun set over the horizon, Ethan took Rachel's hand and knelt down on one knee. "Rachel," he began, his voice full of emotion, "you've brought so much light into my life. Will you marry me?" Tears welled up in Rachel's eyes as she gasped, her heart swelling with a mix of joy and disbelief. She never thought she'd find love again, especially not like this. But here she was, about to marry a man who made her feel seen, valued, and loved. "Yes," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, Ethan, I will marry you." The world around them seemed to fade away as Ethan stood and pulled her into a passionate kiss. The future was uncertain, but together, they knew they could face whatever came their way. Planning the wedding was a whirlwind of excitement and stress. Rachel and Ethan wanted something intimate, away from the glaring eyes of the press and public opinion. They chose a secluded beach, the same one where Ethan had proposed, as the location. As they worked together to organize the details, they found themselves even more deeply in sync. They disagreed at times, like any couple does, but it was clear that their love and respect for each other surpassed any minor conflicts. Rachel handled the big-picture details, while Ethan took care of the smaller things that made everything come together. He was a perfectionist, and she loved how dedicated he was to making their day special. The weeks leading up to the wedding were filled with laughter, planning, and a sense of anticipation that built every day. The wedding day arrived, and the beach was beautiful. The ceremony was simple yet breathtaking, with just a few close friends and family in attendance. Rachel wore a soft ivory gown that perfectly complemented her timeless beauty. Ethan looked dashing in a sharp suit, his youthful energy and love for Rachel evident in every glance he gave her. As they exchanged vows, Rachel couldn't believe how far they had come, how much love and joy had been brought into her life by this man. Ethan, too, was overcome with emotion as he looked at the woman he was about to spend the rest of his life with. "I promise to love you, Rachel, for every day of my life," Ethan said, his voice steady but full of raw emotion. "I promise the same, Ethan," Rachel replied, her voice trembling. "You are my heart, my soul." The crowd cheered, but for Rachel and Ethan, it felt like time had stopped. This was their moment, their new beginning. After the wedding, the couple set off for a luxurious honeymoon in Europe. They spent days exploring cobblestone streets, sharing meals in quaint cafes, and simply enjoying the time together. The bond between them deepened with each new adventure. As Rachel and Ethan returned from their honeymoon, the public began to take even more notice of their unconventional relationship. The tabloids had a field day, publishing every detail they could about the couple. Headlines screamed, "Grocery store cashier weds 70-year-old millionaire," while social media buzzed with reactions ranging from supportive to scandalous. Rachel's social circle, once supportive, began to question her choices. A few friends voiced their concerns about Ethan's true intentions, wondering if he was after her wealth. Ethan, on the other hand, was faced with even harsher judgment. Some of his former co-workers mocked him, while others simply couldn't understand why he would marry a woman so much older than him. Despite the negativity, Rachel and Ethan remained resilient. They leaned on each other, taking comfort in the strength of their bond. They spent less time on social media and more time with the people who truly supported them, those who saw beyond the surface and believed in the power of love, no matter the age or financial status. Rachel looked at Ethan one evening, a tear in her eye, and said, "People will always talk, but as long as we have each other, nothing else matters." Ethan kissed her forehead gently, whispering, "Nothing in this world could change how I feel about you." A few years into their marriage, Rachel and Ethan began to talk about starting a family. While Rachel was in her early 70s, her energy and enthusiasm for life hadn't waned. She had always loved children, and now she was excited about the prospect of having a child with Ethan. Though the idea seemed daunting to some, Rachel knew that with Ethan by her side, they could tackle anything. They explored options for having a family, whether through adoption or surrogacy, and decided to move forward with a surrogate. The process was a roller coaster of emotions, from the initial excitement to the occasional anxiety about how their lives would change. But through every step, Rachel and Ethan were united in their dream. One rainy afternoon, Rachel received the news that they were going to be parents. She stood there, breathless, before bursting into tears of joy. Ethan, who had been working in his office, rushed to her side. She handed him the test results, and his face lit up with disbelief and happiness. "This is real, right? We're really going to be parents?" Ethan asked, his voice trembling with excitement. Rachel nodded, feeling a mix of joy, nerves, and overwhelming love. "We're going to have a family, Ethan, together." A few months later, Rachel and Ethan attended their first ultrasound appointment. Rachel, now in her early 70s, was amazed at the thought of becoming a mother at this stage in her life. The technician smiled as the image of their baby appeared on the screen. A tiny heartbeat flickering in the dark, a miracle that would change their world. Ethan squeezed her hand as they both watched the screen in awe. He couldn't believe that this journey was unfolding, that this child, this piece of their love, was on its way. The reality of fatherhood began to sink in. As the technician spoke softly about the baby's development, Rachel leaned into Ethan, whispering, "This is what I've always wanted, to have a family with you." Ethan looked at her, his heart full. "I never thought this would be our story, but I wouldn't change a thing." The day Rachel and Ethan had dreamed about for months finally arrived. The anticipation was nearly unbearable, but they stayed strong together. The delivery was intense, but through it all, Ethan never left Rachel's side. He held her hand, spoke words of encouragement, and watched in awe as his wife brought their child into the world. When their baby boy was born, both of them were overcome with emotion. Ethan kissed Rachel's forehead, whispering, "You're incredible. We did it." Rachel, exhausted but glowing with happiness, looked at their son and felt an overwhelming surge of love and purpose. She never imagined that in her 70s she would be holding her child, but here she was, surrounded by the love of her life and their new family. They named their son Luke after a beloved family member, and the name seemed to fit perfectly. Luke, with his bright eyes and tiny fingers, was a reminder that life was full of surprises and that true love was a force beyond time. As Luke grew, Rachel and Ethan embraced their new role as parents. They faced the challenges of raising a child at an older age, but their love for each other and their son made every obstacle seem surmountable. Rachel's wisdom and experience as a mother, having raised children of her own from her previous marriage, was invaluable. Ethan, though new to fatherhood, brought a fresh perspective, and together they created a warm, loving environment for their son. They spent countless days in the garden, teaching Luke about the world around him, showing him how to plant flowers, take care of animals, and appreciate the beauty in everyday life. Ethan would often tell him stories about his childhood, while Rachel would share her own adventures, teaching him the importance of resilience and kindness. The couple often reflected on how their love had blossomed in unexpected ways. When Rachel first met Ethan, they were worlds apart, but love had proven to be a bridge that connected them in a way that defied all logic. They had built a life together that was full of meaning, joy, and the promise of a future they could not have imagined without one another. Years passed, and Rachel and Ethan's life together continued to be filled with milestones. Luke began school, and the couple celebrated his achievements, from learning to read to excelling in sports. As Luke grew, so did their bond. Rachel and Ethan had become not just husband and wife, but partners in raising a beautiful child. They also celebrated their own milestones, including anniversaries and personal achievements. Rachel's businesses continued to flourish, while Ethan had carved out a successful career in business management, thanks to the opportunities Rachel had introduced him to. They never stopped challenging each other to dream bigger and to strive for more. One evening, as they sat together in their living room, watching Luke sleep soundly in his bed, Rachel turned to Ethan and said, "I never thought I'd have this kind of happiness, not at this age, but here we are, living our dream." Ethan smiled, his hand gently resting on hers. "Life is full of surprises, Rachel, and I'm so grateful this was the one we got." As the years passed, the couple's love only deepened. They had weathered storms together, faced challenges both personal and public, and had come out stronger on the other side. Rachel's age no longer felt like a barrier, and Ethan's youthfulness no longer seemed like a point of concern. They had become each other's rock, each other's home. On their 20th wedding anniversary, the couple stood on the same beach where they had first gotten married. The sun was setting, the sky painted in hues of gold and pink, and the sound of the waves crashing gently against the shore was the only sound that filled the air. As Ethan kissed her under the setting sun, Rachel smiled. "I don't think I could have asked for a more perfect life," she whispered, her heart full. Ethan, with tears in his eyes, responded, "And I don't think I could have asked for a better love." In that moment, Rachel knew that love had no limits, no boundaries. It was eternal, and with Ethan by her side, she felt like she could conquer anything the world had to offer.